Good evening, everyone. My name is Oscar Rivera, and I'm the program director here at Enfoco, and we are really excited to welcome you to the second session of our Immersive Technology, Art, Activism, and Community Workshop series, hosted in collaboration with BronxNet, Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, and the Bronx Council on the Arts. Before we begin, just want to offer a quick note on accessibility. We are offering tonight's session with closed captions provided by Zoom. You can activate the captions by clicking on the CC button on the bottom of your Zoom window. Additionally, ASL interpretation services are being provided tonight by All Hands in Motion. I would also like to mention that Enfoco's offices are located in the Bronx on what was originally the homeland for the Lenape peoples. We aim to honor all members and accomplishments of the Lenape community, past, present, and future, and acknowledge that the land on which we operate came to us through violent exclusion and erasure of the Lenape and other indigenous peoples, and are committed to dismantling the ongoing legacies of such settler colonialism. The Immersive Technology, Art, Activism, and Community Workshop series is made possible with funds from the New York State Council on the Arts in partnership with Waveform, Immersive Art and Technology Initiative, with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. Ooh, that's a mouthful. The Immersive Technology Workshop series is a 4-part series that will introduce and explore the uses and varying applications of immersive technology. Tonight session is titled Performing Arts and Immersive Technology and is being hosted by Pregones, Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, featuring panelists from Kyoung Specific Beat, the Anonymous Ensemble, and North Star Projects. Special shout out to Samantha Geffen from All Hands in Motion, who is our ASL interpreter for the evening. For those of you who are just getting to know Enfoco is a nonprofit organization whose mission since its inception in 1974 is to highlight, promote, and represent the voices of artists of color while working towards equitable access to mainstream funding and opportunities for our artists and communities. Enfoco's had the opportunity to work with other local organizations, Pregones, BronxNet, and the Bronx Council of the Arts, to develop this workshop series in the hopes of spreading awareness and access to these developing technologies and virtual experiences. For more information on Enfoco and our programs, you can catch us at enfoco.org. With all that being said, I'll be passing on the mic to Arnaldo Lopez, the Managing Director of Pregones.
Thank you, Oscar, and hello, everybody. I'm Arnaldo Lopez, and as Oscar said, I'm the Managing Director for Pregones, Puerto Rican Traveling Theater. We are a performing ensemble creating its own repertory of musical theater works. It's a company founded by Puerto Rican artists and opening to the universal messages of Latina culture, and also connecting across different cultures for understanding and for creativity. I'm really pleased to be able to facilitate this conversation. More and more we see at our theaters in the Bronx and Manhattan the need of and the interest of artists to do work that's multimedia and that includes both film technology and new kinds of technology. And the conversation here is very much about those kinds of emergent technologies, the kinds of risk that artists are taking, and the framing of the conversation is specifically around a set of questions that we have invited representatives of 3 companies to consider. And these are new and immersive technologies ushering in a new era of experimental, hybrid, digital, and live performance for global majority artists? Where do immersive technology, AR, VR, MR, XR, and their kind have to offer? What do they have to offer theater creatives in terms of freedoms of expression? Do they widen or bridge the gap between artists and audiences, producers and consumers, individuals and community? I am especially interested in having our guests talk about what attracts them to these emergent technologies, what has worked for them, what's ahead, and how presenting venues like our theater can best support this kind of work. Each of the 3 companies is going to do a presentation and share some work samples for existing and forthcoming works. And we are going to invite representatives of Anonymous Ensemble, Eamon Farrell and Lucrecia Briceño, to kick us off.
I am Eamon Farrell. I'm one of the founding members of Anonymous Ensemble, which was founded in 2001.
And hi, my name is Lucrecia Briceño, and I joined Anonymous Ensemble in 2008 as a lighting designer, and my work has developed as a visual dramaturg. and I'm currently one of 4 co-artistic directors of the company. I also want to acknowledge and be incredibly grateful for Enfoco to allow us to come and join. I love everybody in this panel. We're dear friends, and I'm so excited to hear what everybody's doing.
Yes. Okay, so I'm also a co-artistic director of Anonymous Ensemble, and we function as a non-hierarchical cooperative ensemble. And we focus on exploring how innovative technologies can help us theater makers to engage with audiences in new ways in live performance. Share my screen.
So what we're going to do is just tell you a brief history of our work and our first introductions with technologies.
So one of our first productions, or our first projects, was this show called The Best, and it was from 2003 to 2008. And it was really the beginning of us exploring technology in a live performance context. So this was a show that was a reaction to the Iraq War, and we were pretending that we were web broadcasters, even though we weren't, because the technology didn't exist yet, because YouTube didn't even exist yet. But we began to play with cameras and projectors and digital technologies, and just started to work on integrating web technologies towards the end of the project by Skyping people in, and also doing these really rudimentary web streams and sort of figuring out what was possible. Our next major foray into what digital technology could do is a show called Leave a Level More, which I'm going to scroll up to.
Yes, and Leave a Level More was really a great introduction for me as a lighting designer into the world of technology. I had to sort of learn how to light a performer on a green screen in front of a film and have a live audience at the same time. So we have 3 different type of lighting vocabulary happening at the same time. Leave a Level More is a live film love affair. We have our main character, and we sort of introduce her into the footage of a German filmmaker, Heinrich von Stroheim. And it was just an incredible opportunity for us, and a very playful opportunity to also involve the audience and the always narrative stories and little love affairs and family histories within our storytelling. So it was really, really playful just to put all of those things together at the same time.
This really led us to our next foray, and like sort of deepening our exploration of like what it is to work with an audience as collaborators using digital technologies, with this show called The Future.
Chloe, what do you contribute to the sustainability of life on Earth?
I recently bought some beeswax wrap, so I don't use cling film anymore.
Thank you.
So the premise of The Future was that there was a group of beings, and that you see these beings behind the counter. There's a group of people coming from the future trying to investigate the present moment, and we have the opportunity of the audience members to sort of answer to different questions that sort of help to define and understand their opinions, histories, moments at this particular, historical context, and with different points of view. It was really interesting. We have a very small audience, 16 people, and it was a pre-pandemic moment. This is 2019. This was an abandoned restaurant in the South Street Seaport. It was also a massive installation. We were sort of owning the space and creating this immersive, maybe, relationship with our audience. And we really have to hone our skills on audio. And Iman will speak a little about the technology we're using.
Yeah, so I would say it was definitely immersive because the audience, they're all in headsets with microphones, and we had 64 channels of digital audio servicing 16 audience members. So with in and out control for each audience member, like when their mics were on and when they were hearing content. And as they engage with this conversation with each other in these sort of Discord-like pods, we were actually recording their audio, and our sound team was furiously editing their audio into these little sound bites that then gets sampled in the music that we play back to the audience within that performance. So it creates this sort of like echoing examination of self and society and sort of the present moment. And really the future was very much about the present. And it also provided the seeds to our next major project, which was Flight.
Yes, and Flight was a project that we visioned early on before the pandemic. We have one of our collaborators from the future moved to Australia. So we were sort of trying to keep this relationship and move this relationship into a visual relationship. We all have collaborations with artists from all over the world. So we thought that this was an opportunity to reach out and get to work with them.
Yeah, so early in 2017, we started to explore this new technology that one of our programmers brought to our attention that was called Zoom. And we were like, this is amazing. You can do anything with Zoom. You can like collaborate with people all over the world. So we started to work on that in 2018. And then 2019, we started doing our first broadcasts. And we were figuring out OBS and web streaming and how to get Zoom into OBS and how to like create these sort of real-time performances that span continents. And then we actually had we had a Flight presentation in early March of 2020, and then the pandemic hit, and then suddenly it was like all we could do. So we kept developing the project on a monthly basis, and also began sharing the technologies that we were using, like Zoom and Zoom OSC, which was really developed for Flight, that allowed us to integrate web performance into our suite of software that we already knew and were comfortable with.
And the video that you guys are looking at, or we're just looking at, it was our most recent Flight. We have the owl from Jamaica, we have the character of the hippogriff from La Paz, and the tree sparrow from Hong Kong. So there are 3 different performers sharing a space at the same time. This is all live. This is not recorded. So, and we also had an audience in Brooklyn. We always hope, pre-pandemic, we hope that we will have always this live audience always joining us and being part of this conversation with people and artists from all over the world. We had over 14 collaborations with artists all over the world. We have people in Tokyo, Singapore, Tanzania, London. Dar es Salaam with a motorcycle and his phone, going all over the city, Mumbai, Colombia, Rabat. It is really has been a reflection of the pandemic experience, really, if we just put it from March 2020 until the last one we did this summer. So we are very excited for what we did, yeah.
We also did a Flight out of Pregones Theater in the Bronx, which was a really
yes, that was our Caribbean experience. That was really wonderful, really, really wonderful.
So this brings us to our current project, which is Yantop. And so this one was really, the seeds of this project were conversations between myself and Lucrecia about our Peruvian heritages. And
he announced to me that my left arm was Incan because they had figured out that I was like 1/8 Incan or something. And that my Incan relatives were Yantop and Yulip.
It sounds like
so that is my mom speaking right there. And if you didn't hear it, she just said that our relatives were Yantop and Yulip. And so that was an indigenous, probably Quechua ancestor of mine. And so Lucrecia, so I knew that I had this ancestry far back, and Lucrecia and I began these conversations about indigeneity in Peru and in North America, and comparing the status of each and how it's oftentimes romanticized, having some kind of Native American heritage by European North Americans, whereas in South America, it's a very different status where, the majority of people in Peru are indigenous, but it's still very much denigrated and not celebrated. So we began exploring this piece by both exploring our ancestries and talking to relatives, but also talking to scholars and Quechua artists, and we also began exploring light as a generative medium and trying to explore what that could possibly be, which led us to machine learning because, well, we started by using QR codes to trigger podcast audio, but we had all these objects that were actually heirlooms that I inherited from my grandmother. And we wanted the objects themselves to be able to speak to the audience members without QR codes. So we began exploring how we could use machine learning to trigger podcast audio for an audience moving around the installation with their cameras on their phones via Zoom. So we did a lot of coding, a lot of software development, and it's just starting to happen.
Yes, and this project, as Iman mentioned, is really multi-layered, and it's one of our members starting to learn Quechua. We spoke to many people about what it means to be Quechua, and we were quite lucky to find and to meet Irma Alvarez Cosco, the woman that you see in the video right now. She's an amazing inspiration. She's a wonderful poet that sort of has, lead us through, Quechua content, Quechua narrative, and really, having the opportunity to show what it means to be a contemporary Quechua woman, and with all these story behind and all these layers of knowledge. So this is pretty much, where our project is right now. We are still working at it. We're doing more workshops and more development work for it, and we are excited to make it happen in Pregones. Pregones has been actually one of the first places that we actually did our one of our development sort of work. So it has been wonderful to turn back, and we're probably going to do our premiere with you guys. So we are just hoping dates.
They don't know that yet.
They do know that.
Yeah, they kind of know that.
They do know that. So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Iman and Lucrecia. I am really taken in by the work samples. I think jumping into what this work is beginning to look like is especially exciting. There's a few threads that I think are worth lifting before we move on to our second presentation, but topics of audience involvement and how that becomes more deepened, mixing media and content that are of different origin, which I think is exciting. The whole technical considerations around time and space and what it means to connect across great distances, bringing both cultures and communities in contact. The limitations and opportunities that some of the equipment required for this kind of work may present. And of course, the increasing complexity of production as much as the layered quality of the work. So, with those thoughts and more to come as we move forward, I'm pleased to invite Kyoung Park from Kyoung Pacific Beat to share from his work and experience.
Great. Thank you, Arnaldo. Thank you so much for having me, and special thanks to Enfoco for hosting the series and the invitation. I just wanted to start by saying I'm a playwright and a storyteller, and I work in theater because I'm actually technologically impaired. So tonight I'm going to share with you a few stories about my personal background, the story of our theater company, and the story of how we've been creating our latest work in progress, Nero. And then I'll end with a 5-minute excerpt of our most current work. So a bit about me. My name is Kyoung Park. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am artistic director of Kyoung's Pacific Beat, a peacemaking theater company based in Brooklyn. And I'm a third-generation North Korean born and raised in Santiago, Chile. I grew up as an immigrant kid in a small Korean community of about 100 immigrant families. Our community was very insular, but my childhood neighborhood called Bella Vista was a very interesting neighborhood to grow up in. It had a mix of Korean immigrants, Palestinian immigrants. Chile has the second largest Palestinian immigrant community following the US. And along with small immigrant businesses, my family also lived next to the Museum of Fine Arts, Pablo Neruda's house in Santiago, and El Mercado Central. So I sort of grew up in a great mix of immigrant communities, artists, and merchants. And that's kind of the background and history I inherited while growing up in Chile. I came of age as a writer, witnessing 9/11 and its aftermath and the war on terror during the beginning of my sophomore year in college. And this event deeply affected my artistic practice. As some of you may know, the dictatorship I grew up with in Santiago, Chile was instilled by the CIA on September 11th, 1973. So of course, when 9/11 happened, I felt like this was a day of political history that I had to really grapple with. So as an artist, I began to ask myself, what's the point of writing plays in times of war? And that's the question I keep asking myself when writing plays. And the reason why I hold on to this question is because I know that the reality of my family in Chile and my extended family in Korea, which is still living in a state of war, is that these realities won't change unless we create a culture of peace here in America. So that's the origin story for the mission of my work as an artist and for my company. And our mission as an organization is to work with artists, non-artists, and local communities to transform experiences of oppression into peace messages made public through performance. So tonight I'm going to be sharing with you the story of how we've misused Zoom as a tool to tell the story of Nero in these times of COVID. And I think more importantly for tonight's session, just not the how, but the why performing artists such as myself adopted new technologies to create theater. Nero is a Shakespearean epic that tells the story of George Bush and the War on Terror as the rise and fall of Nero's Roman Empire. And we chose, as an arts organization of color, to create this work to examine the relationships between white male privilege, American exceptionalism, American empire, and how this reality perpetuates white supremacy. It's political satire. And I think that the humor just comes from a coping mechanism to deal with political history that is very difficult to address in performance. And also it's a way of freeing ourselves as artists to queer, distort, and sort of explore fact and fiction as an act of creativity and as a reflection of how history is a palimpsest. And hopefully what our work is doing is challenging the ways we normalize acceptable narratives in our mainstream. So when our company decided to start working through Zoom, we faced a lot of questions about whether theater is still theater if it's not live and in person. But theater for me is about storytelling and ritual. So as long as artists are gathering to tell the same story to people who intentionally gather to receive it, I feel like storytelling then becomes a ritual, and whether it's live or via Zoom, we're still collectively creating theater. So with those beliefs in mind, we built green screen studios for all of our actors using green tablecloths that they were hanging in their bedrooms and in their kitchens and living rooms so that we could create Nero safely from home. We used Zoom and Bandcamp to create new music, videos, and songs, and we used the Postal Service to share props and costumes while we were in quarantine. And you know, COVID affected our company quite deeply because many of us were displaced and left New York after losing all of our work. So Zoom became a way for our company to stay together. And it was also a safe way for us to engage with our community because so many of us in our community were feeling unsafe due to the anti-Black and anti-Asian violence that was happening during the beginning of the pandemic. So Zoom became a virtual space and our virtual theater to do rehearsals, to do performance work, which we're then able to share live via Zoom with our community, and also through asynchronous screenings of digitally enhanced material that you're going to see tonight as an example. And we shared this work with a lot of community-driven online conversations tackling white supremacy. So to draw parallels between Nero and Bush, we made Nero's war against Parthians the war on terror, and the war that his war is catalyzed by the history of the Great Fire of Rome, which, you know, is a time in which Nero is assumed to have played this lyre as the city burned in a fire, and that event became our 9/11. And Nero, as an emperor, was tutored by this playwright named Seneca, who in real life adapted many Greek tragedies for the entertainment of Roman courtsmen. So through Seneca's stories in our play and through the plays that we adapt in our own work, we're really looking at the role of tragedy in theater. I'm a student of Boal's Theater of the Oppressed, and he argues that tragedy is actually an oppressive narrative structure that's used to portray the downfall of extraordinary people to maintain the status quo by creating complacency and fear in the people that observe tragedies. And in these times where we're seeing so many horrible things in our culture happen every day, we've been really examining sort of what tragedy means as a dramatic and narrative structure. Not everyone in our community has access to the technology we've been using. So we've been also produce public interventions in our neighborhoods. This summer, we created a live screening of the work we've been doing through Zoom in busy sort of business corridor in Flatbush. And we paired our screenings with mutual aid campaigns, providing free food and PPE to our community, and featuring guest speakers from our community doing abolitionist work. And, all of these actions on the grounds are, I think, following what Boal said, just kind of believing that theater and its purpose is to present these stories with an anti-oppression lens to invite spectators to become spect-actors that can collectively imagine and devise solutions to the systems that oppress us. So it's in that spirit that I want to share with you now, Nero. The piece in particular may be familiar to those who have visited our website before this event. This is a music video we produced in September 2020 when we decided to make this work online. Many of us learned how to do this very quickly through YouTube tutorials and calling expert friends like Eamon to figure out how this technology even worked. And 2 years later, we're now developing our final world premiere production of Nero in residency at Pregones in the Bronx. And as we embark on our shooting schedule next week, I'm happy to revisit with you where we began this journey. Yeah, so now we can go to the video.
My dear family, do as I say. There's no more time for child's play. If you ignore me, there's a high price to pay. You can try to escape me, no way you'll get away. City of sin, Rome, no goodness to see. Rome, you make my head spin. Rome, suck my violin. Rome, city of sin, Rome, no goodness to see. Rome, fuck you, fuck me. Rome, suck my violin. My wife Octavia, do as I say. Today's no day to vacay. Try to seduce me, I'll puke on the parquet. You can try to control me, but I won't love ya. No way! No way! Rome, city of sin. Rome, no goodness to see. Rome, you make my head spin. Douche Britannicus, do as I say. Don't try to oust me, you're gay. Try to dethrone me, you'll only go astray. You can revolt against me, but I'll hang you in display. Rome, city of sin. Rome, no goodness to see. Rome, you make my head spin. Rome, suck my violin. Rome, city of sin. Rome, no goodness to see. Rome, fuck you, fuck me. Rome, sucks my violin. Can't you see? You can't destroy me. Can't you see? You can't destroy me. 'Cause you are the governors. But I am the emperor. I am the emperor.
Thank you so much. Bravo. That was thrilling. And I see a lot of cheers on screen. Appreciate the sort of richness with which you have shared this, Kyoung. And I also want to take a second to lift a few of the things that jump at me. I hear you talking about mission-centered work and how to put technology to its service, multidisciplinarity, and the synergy between imagination and change work. I think that this is also a recurrent thought. The misuse of readily available hardware and software to create different forms of immersion. Also a sign of early adoption, I think. Risk-taking and early adoption of emergent technology as a liberatory practice, important. And using technology to reframe the audience's presumed spectator role. I think that those are all threads that we'll have the opportunity to unpack a little bit. Thank you. I'm excited to give the room to folks I sincerely admire, Adriana Gaviria from North Star Projects and her collaborator in the project that is being highlighted today, Gabriel Torres.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing to watch everyone's work, and I'm also seeing everyone's comments and questions, especially about just the process. So I will touch a little bit on that as I talk about our project. So North Star Projects, I would say, grew more so during the pandemic. It was an initiative that I created because I wanted to engender experiences that empower, inspire, and build community. And I was really interested in not only live events, but also the digital space. And during the pandemic, of course, as we all were scrambling to figure out how to continue creating during the time, I definitely, like many of my colleagues here, jumped right in and started exploring all the tools that we had available to us. So I definitely explored green screens, a lot of editing. I did a motherhood concert during that time, which was also another thing that was pretty complex when, as I see Kyoung's music and singing and all that stuff, that's also very complex when you're working in this digital space that you have to rely on whether you're live streaming or whether you're recording and then doing the editing in post. So there is a huge learning curve. And then Soulfest is a theater festival that I do in partnership with Pregones and Puerto Rican Traveling Theater during the summer each year. And this year, I was so excited to bring a VR project to Soul Fest, Gabriel and I met in another theater festival, which was online, which was Encuentro. Encuentro to me was a theater festival that I have also been a part of, and I've been inspired by all the artists that have been part of Encuentro, which motivated me to come to New York and be part of creating Soul Project and also North Star projects. So Gabriel and I met during Encuentro because Gabriel had a project called The House of Dust, and I was very moved by his project and also the use of different types of storytelling techniques. And we decided to collaborate on this VR project. So I'm gonna start sharing the screen, and Gabriel is gonna talk to you a little bit about the inspiration for the project. What you will be seeing is one of the challenges that we had was, in order to experience an excerpt of the VR project, we needed to have headsets. And you only have a limited amount of time and also a limited amount of headsets available for the public to be able to experience it. So what we did is, for people that were coming into the theater, we had a couple of documentary style videos playing in the house and talking about the VR project called Work in Progress. And then we also had an opportunity for people who wanted to go try the headsets on and experience the world within the headset. They would head upstairs and they would try on the different headsets. So what we're going to share, what Gabriel and I are going to share with you, is a little bit of what you would experience when you put the headsets on. And we both are also learning as we go. And so we're just really excited to share this with you. So here we go.
Adriana, do you think it would be better to just give a little background and then we play it?
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriel Torres, pronouns are they, them. So this is a project that was born out of another project called House of Dust. House of Dust is an initiative to bring awareness about substance abuse and destigmatization of substance use inside of the queer and the Latina community. I am a person who has struggled with substance use for a very long time. And I think some years ago, as I was going through a rehabilitation process and a recovery process, I was attending an outpatient program and it was not enough for me. I ended up in a hospital one day, and when I got out of the hospital, I decided that I wanted to understand how to deal with my substance use disorder through art, because nothing else was working. So I started to have a lot of conversations with different organizations, because at the time I was also thinking a lot about going beyond representation in storytelling. I'm very interested in how to really create inquiries within community and how give space to community with the resources and the skills that I have. So the first point for me was to engage with community, to ask questions and understand what the project should be like, while I was writing a show that was about my experience, just to try to let it out. And some of the things that I found out from organizations is that it was really difficult to get funding for anything that was creative, because funding that came from the government needed to have very specific metrics in order for people to be able to create programs like the outpatient program that I was going through. And I got involved in a conversation with an institute called the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And particularly what it really inspired me to do was, what if there was a way to create data and show that there's a way to intersect artistic practice for recovery. We created the installation, which is what was presented at Encuentro. And we also created a game that's for people struggling with substances, with the subject, with the theme. If you were about to reach out to your dealer, could you, instead of that, play a game, and would it help you to develop those skills that you've lost, to breathe, to focus, to concentrate, to associate negative thoughts with distracting thoughts? We tested the game, and after we tested the game for 6 weeks at the LGBT Center, we found out that we were not only being able to release through the game their anxiety, but they were also being able to develop the skills so that they didn't need to use the game. In the 5th and the 6th week, they didn't need to use the game. They were able to breathe in that moment, or they were able to scream, or they were able to focus on something to help them. From then on, giving you all of the background of this, I've been really thinking about how experiential immersiveness can help in recovery. And specifically from my point, how storytelling can truly be an activation of that process for people, even for people that may not be thinking about it, but that there is a part of themselves that knows that they may deal with something in the moment, not only for substance use disorders, but mental illness, or I don't know, living in society at large. I went to a rehab facility in Colombia. I just came back from Colombia. I was there for 3 months. I decided that I wanted to focus just on this one for a while. And I had two experiences in 2 different places. In one of them, I was held against my will, and my family was gaslighted in many ways to keep me inside of this place. I was able to leave the facility because a friend helped me with the local police and Department of Health. And then I ended up in another place that took upon the 12 steps of AA and personalized it for a Latino experience to help people through one activity per step achieve recovery, which is also very connected to immersiveness and what I've been thinking about experience. So I was talking to Adriana, and I told her this story about the rehab facilities, and Adriana was like, let's work on this, let's make something happen. And that's what we're about to show you, a small prototype that was created over a week. I'm really proud of saying that we created this over a week. There's also another element that I find really fascinating, and is the use of a motion capture software that was created by a company called Technodramatis, in which through the AR kit of our iPad, we were able to film all of the motions of the performer without having any type of suit or anything, so very accessible, and then just turn it into something that we dropped inside of this virtual world.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Yes, we had a wonderful performer. And I'm going to play the excerpt now.
Creo que es la única manera de sobrevivir. Creo que es la única manera en la que puedo sobrevivir en un mundo donde todo el mundo está a través de conflicto y de frustración. Caminando.
Hi. Yes, you. Hello. We are all so grateful to have you here today. Welcome to our home. This is La Casa de Bel. There is no better place for you to be today. Estamos celebrando tu llegada. We are so excited to have you here, for real. Trust your sister. You've made the right decision. This house has helped 1,300 addicts recover, of which, we've helped recover an outstanding 1,040 people. Unfortunately, there are still 260 people out there. But that's also why we are so happy you are here. Out there in the world, the terrícolas, yes, the earthlings, may think of us as crazy. Here, us, the aliens, have found new ways to breathe life into our cute lungs. La Casa de Bel was formed by Herman Sicar, a bazuquero, a bazooka addict who has been sober for more than 20 years. He is especial. No, really. Gosh, you'll see. He once pawned his own dog for... He surely regretted it later. You'll meet the dog as well. The house is actually named after him, and of course, babes, Bill W. Who's that? Well, the founder of the antiquated 12 Steps. Universe, today I accept myself as I am. I surrender to this moment in life in which you've taken me to learn, become, and blossom. Today I accept I am nothing on my own. For so long, I was a tiny, lost star. When darkness permeated, I floated towards all of you. Only by the sharing of our mistakes, detailed mistakes, we can be reconnected to the constellations to which we belong. Please, take a second to look at the fire. Let your hands be burnt by everything you've lived to go back to the universe. Be it then purified.
Mi nombre es Álvaro Esteban.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Give it up for North Star Projects. I really am moved by the work. Thank you to all the presenters. Shout out to Samantha, our ASL interpreter, for keeping us connected and fluent over this 3 presentations. I wanna take the opportunity to also lift a few threads that jump at me from what Adriana and Gabriel shared. I'm interested in this idea of exploring the digital space as an alternative. This was a reality during pandemic, and pandemic was really an accelerator of digital development and adoption across all creative sectors, which is an interesting thing. The incorporating new technology in existing projects, raising resources for work that is newly hybrid or that is taking on a significant new technology component, working across multiple social sectors, discovering impacts and outcomes that are unique to immersive tech experiences, and immersive tech as intersectional intervention. I think that those are all, really important qualities of this work and also part of its potential. For those of you who are tuning in tonight for the first time, this is part of a series, Art, Activism, and Immersive Technology, through which we're hoping to introduce the tools, to hear from early adopters, and to also really invite folks to think of ways in which this work can be something that you may jump into, and something that has relevance for your practice and for the community. I'm going to ask our panelists to think together, to maybe respond a little bit to each other. And the first question I want to offer out has to do, since you're all theater practitioners, I'm interested in the complexities that are added. So what has changed in relationship to what is visible, what we used to call behind the scenes, or still do, but what's the complexity in this kind of work for what's visible to the audience and what is visible to you on the producing end?
I can jump. Yeah, sure. Yes, I could definitely jump in. So where do I begin? For anything Zoom related or virtual presentations, the idea of having a green room and to be able to speak to your artists and prepare is really important. A lot of the platforms that were available were not built right for storytelling or theater. So that has been great, because as users have opted to use specific platforms, they talk to the developers of a specific Zoom or StreamYard or OBS, which is an open source platform, to see what works and what doesn't. And so things get developed really quickly. So that has been really exciting. And so all of that is happening in the background, like it even just happened today with all of you having audio issues. Normally, all we have to worry about is just, creating, making our stories, but there's all this technical stuff that's happening in the background. For our VR project specifically, like I had mentioned before, we're dealing with not only headsets, but we're dealing with sharing equipment still during a pandemic. So making sure that everything was cleaned between uses, following certain safety protocols in order to be able to have people be able to go up and explore that option, those tools. Gabriel can also speak a little bit to this. We found that the community is so helpful with each other. it was amazing. Not knowing is fine because someone does know and they are willing to help you. So we did have a lot of questions regarding development, or how are we going to capture the performer? What does that entail? Do we need to be in person? Does the performer need to be in person? Can we do it via Zoom if they have a green background? For our particular project, the performer went to a specific physical location, was captured by a phone application, and we had someone else also using a computer in order to make sure that the avatar was being transferred correctly. And Gabriel was zooming in from Colombia and I was zooming in from Florida. So that was a little bit of a insight into like the background, that you wouldn't normally get to see because you see the end product. So this is a little bit of example of what happened with our project.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Does anyone wish to follow up and respond? I'm also thinking of our prep for this conversation in which we talked about planning, prep, and production. So again, that part that I think is behind the scenes for most folks who experience the work, and then performance. So
I actually recently wrote an article about, it's titled, "But how will they know it's live?" And it's about internet performance, because back when we did Liebe Love More in 2014 with Anonymous Ensemble, the green screen was in front of the audience, the cameras are in front of the audience, and a huge screen was in front of the audience. And so the audience, there was no question of the audience seeing the like ridiculous labor of trying to create this film live with all these different cameras and crazy costume changes and running in and out of the green screen. And that was part of the fun of it. That was part of the pleasure for the audience, was watching the labor. And then thinking back to early pandemic, I did a video design for a production of Mad Forest at Bard College. And this was like April 2020. So it was right after the beginning of the pandemic, but I happened to like already have these technologies on hand because of our work on flight. And there was this instance where we were running through, and it was directed by Ashley Tata, and she was really wanted a filmic look. She wanted to be shot clean, shot, everything sort of done well and tightly. And, there's an enormous amount of labor going on to make that happen. But we had somebody from the Bard staff join us for one of the dress rehearsals, and they were like, there's no way that people are going to think that this is live. They were just like, it's like watching a film. They were like, how can you make it live? And we had talked about having the chat going and everything, but the performers really couldn't be in the chat. And so then we introduced this pre-show where the audience got to see the actors all with the green screens behind them in the Zoom grid, and explain to them what was about to happen, that the performers were about to do this Carol Churchill play live, because we needed the audience to know that the labor was there and that it was happening just off screen. So, but it's something that I think, and nowadays I think people are more, understanding that like what they're watching is live, because we have this field of live internet performance now that audiences understand.
I can sort of jump in. So we began our process, and I saw Eamon's work, and I did call him, and I was like, how did you do that? Because it's amazing. And also, how could we do that? And what we learned was in the exploration of how to use Zoom, there was definitely a lot that we could do via Zoom that felt like a rehearsal process. When we were all working on a play together in a Zoom room, we could create a sense of space, of shared space and emotional connection that felt like we were able to be together and craft a new piece of work. But then once it came to the production of it, it did become, as Adriana said, a lot more technical. And even though we wanted the same things that Eamon shared about creating a filmic quality to the work, actually, we could not achieve that with the ways we were using Zoom at that moment. We were dealing with Zoom lags, and also different internet connectivities and access to internet to begin with. So we realized that there were limitations to how much we could create in performance live, and began to explore what we could do in a post-production process. So what became added was an entirely post-production editing process for our work, which became an additional component to the way we made our shows. And while we're used to rehearse and perform something, actually we ended up rehearsing, performing, and then spending a lot of time editing in post a lot of the digital backgrounds and animations you see in our work. So luckily, I work in a company with artists who are as crazy as me and are willing to learn how to use new software. So we all took Premiere classes and After Effects classes, and recall whatever film classes we've taken, and then the work became more cinematic and more filmic. And because we're working on an epic that's 5 hours long, and when no one was going to sit in front of a computer for 5 hours, we just decided to adopt an episodic narrative storytelling sort of framework, so that our 5 hour long play would become 5 hour long episodes that we'd sort of produce and present as a story that has 5 chapters. So a lot of TV and film language began influencing some of our creative decisions, and a lot of the post-production process has become something new that we've had to learn. But what's been great is that people watch Zoom shows, and now that they're so familiar with it, just the ways we are innovating with the Zoom grid sparks people's curiosity and interest. So it's been a great way of just reframing the way we are connecting. And in our final production, which is going to be shot live, we're still going to create scenes of that play in Zoom grid format to just kind of honor this moment and the fact that this is a piece of pandemic art.
I think 2 things that really come to mind hearing everybody speak is the first one about the resourcefulness and I always call it like the hustling of making theater, but being met with access, of Adriana. This happened to both of us in this week, but the way that the tech community replied to me as a theater artist who has not done anything tech-wise, and coming and saying, I need support on this, I need to learn how to do these things, was very on the moment. And everybody understood it, and everybody was like, I'm here for you, let's bond together, let's try to figure it out. I personally haven't had that experience inside of the theater community. And I think 2 things that come to mind when thinking about that is physical space, is the fact that we gather in theater together physically, and that requires travel, that requires having to deal with somebody on your face where you're not able to put a boundary. But the moment that you remove those limits, it seems to be easier to communicate with people about a specific matter, about a specific subject, about making something together. And it really makes me think of the impact and the power that theater artists can have in these spaces because of our ability to make with nothing incredible things. So just thinking about having access and having a community that is responsive, that is truly responsive, that can, and not because, I don't think that it's because we as theater artists, we don't want to do it, but it's because we don't have the space or the capacity to be able to do those things. But being met with that, with the resourcefulness that we have, really just, my mind just went like, oh, wow, the work could be, we could create so many cool things. And then the other thing that really comes to mind is aesthetics, because I personally feel that theater in the United States tends to be too stoic, or tends to be very inside of specific forms and structures. And the moment that all of this intersects with this, then we have more space for experimentation inside of what these aesthetics are. Those are really 2 things that are in my mind.
That creative rub seems to me salient in the work of all three of your groups. I think that that's absolutely central. I'm really, Kyoung started to unpack something about the actual, creation of digital environments. And I'm really interested in the role of designers and programmers and the kinds of relationships that you've had to build to make your, to make your projects happen. I know that Anonymous Ensemble is designer driven. That is, a privilege. And maybe I'll ask you to take a stab at that. Can you speak to the centrality of the designer in the process, and can you speak to how you reach for other collaborators?
Lou, do you want to start? I know you
Sure. Yes, of course. I mean, I'm a designer. I'm a lighting designer by trade, and this was a particular opportunity to give a stab at something that I was always curious about. I was always curious about film and TV, but I have always been a woman of theater. I mean, I think that I have grown up in the theater. My life is in the theater in Peru, where I'm from, and translate a lot of my skills here in the States. And I train as a designer, as a lighting designer. But I keep saying, and I using these words, I'm also a visual dramaturg. I don't think a lot of people understand what that means, but I mean, us as designers, we help the audience to manage the whole picture. So I think that having the picture in these, squares sort of help and help us, but at the same time make us struggle. I think for us in our process as we had in Anonymous Ensemble, everything needed to be live, but there's so much that we did in rehearsal. There's so much, and we definitely, I keep going back to this image of, okay, one time we have this beautiful performer in Lima, Peru, and he doesn't have anything in his house, because of course he doesn't have any lighting equipment or anything, and only an overhead lighting that looked terrible. So I said, could you turn on your TV? And then he is in the dark dancing beautifully, and the light source is the TV. So and it's a small telephone. I think that one of the things I asked him on is like, if we could only use as camera the telephone, so everybody in the world could use that. And I refer that in our conversation earlier as like, we had one of our performers go through Dar es Salaam with his telephone in his arm, and he's on a motorcycle, and we are driving in the sunset, and sometimes in rehearsal it looked better, sometimes it didn't. So we have a lot of footage of a lot of stuff that looked amazing in rehearsal that it could not be repeated again while we were actually live. But as a designer, you could organize so much, and then yet sometimes things don't happen the same way, just like in theater. So it felt really refreshing. It's like, yeah, that's not gonna happen again. So, and I think that one of the things that I love about being a lighting designer is that our moments, how we work, is ephemeral. After the moment is gone, is gone. So I think that that's something that I have to honor to our trade, and think about it as this moment. And I think the Kyoung is City Beautiful. This is pandemic art. But now where are we going forward with it? And I think one of the amazing things that we're doing, for example, with our project Young Top, is that we are developing a relationship with an audience in the Andes in Peru. So we have like people in their mountains listening to us, looking at us, and I'm excited to incorporate those moments and those, what does it mean to design for a different culture. So that's where we're going, and how to honor all of that is complicated, and you have to know where to step and how to step back, and the lens of how you're seeing culture is important too.
Thank you so much, Lucrecia. Adriana, I see that you shared some recommendations, but do you want to jump and speak to this?
Yes. So I saw in the chat that someone was asking about Technodramatist and a couple of other collaborators that we worked with. So I put it in the chat. So Technodramatist was the Avatar Motion Nadi Company for Unity and game development, and Kevin Liabson, is that how you say it? Liabson, was our VR consultant. So those were our collaborators that we're very, very grateful to. This technology, which we brought up a little bit before, as far as access and the price and all of that, is something that we also were faced with, and that we're hoping that these conversations help to create more opportunities and more access to this technology, because it can be very expensive. But like Gabriel and I said, people were just so open and willing to help, that it was a really great experience for both of us.
I would like to talk a little about the design process. I think so. I was looking for a developer. We had a developer, and then the person that was going to help us couldn't do it at the moment. And I started to ask around, and one person sent me to another person, and I arrived to Nadie, which is a company in Colombia. And Juan, who's the person who runs the company, is an educator at heart. And I'm bringing this up because I do think that part of the expense of this is the lack of literacy. And how, I mean, at this moment, if you go online, there's so many programs and people that are willing to teach you how to develop, and programs where you don't have to pay anything and they help you get a job and then you pay it back, which is really interesting. I'll leave some resources as well in here if somebody's interested, but lack of resources for literacy in these, and then finding the person that's willing to help you with it. And I think when I talked to him about the project, he was very, very interested about how this could be a learning curve as well for his students, because he created this company only with his students. So everybody that works in the company are their students. But in the design process, it was so interesting to see a desire from them to figure out a way that everything look neat and to a certain type of quality. I don't have anything against quality, but I do think that there is a space of experimentation in a space of seeing different aesthetics and different forms that can be sometimes lost because of the structures that we decide that things have to be like. I personally really relied on designers, because at the end, I'm just able to envision something, and who's able to put it together and create an aesthetic for it are the designers. I do think that the process, the final result wouldn't have been what we have if there hadn't been a space where I took a step back and I said, I don't know how to make this. I am not the expert on this. You're the person who's gonna make the best out of it. So let's say we ended up with this avatar that we created, and then we're like, we were not able to get a full body. We're only able to have up to here of the character. And I was really scared with it, like, this is gonna look really weird with this avatar just hanging in the middle of this space talking about these really heavy things. And they took the avatar and they created like that little thing that makes it look like it's from a portal. Those little things that I wouldn't think about if I hadn't given the space to the designer to be able to truly do their job, that wouldn't have came across. And coming back to the idea of experimentation and inquiry with it, I just think it's a really good lesson as well as a theater artist of how much space you can give to somebody. How as a director or as a creator, you can give so much space and accept that you don't need to have all of the answers, and that somebody else may be better to answer those things than you do.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Kyoung.
Yeah, if I can share my screen, I'd love to speak about the design process for Nero. So the main exploration and the artistic inquiry around it is how can we dismantle white supremacy as a company of artists of color? So we decided to center whiteness and then find ways to deconstruct and dismantle it. And one of the things that sort of we began exploring in the rehearsal process was a process of re-indigenization and really understanding our own sort of ancestry and cultural memory as a way of really addressing the ways we also internalize whiteness as people of color. So I can share with you actually a lookbook that was created by our costume designer, Andy Jordan. And what's really beautiful about it is that we'll begin telling the story with creation of a very white world, and to really address the fact that, you know, even in Rome wasn't white, it was whitewashed by art historians. So, you know, our conceptions even of ancient history and Eurocentric history is always normalized as white when it really isn't. So over the course of the design of our work, you're going to see the incorporation of colors and to really, you know, sort of understand the relation of whiteness to white supremacy. And the colors we begin to add were something that is based on both the cultural memory and ancestry of the performers that are part of our show. So the final looks of our costume designs for our project are going to be tailored to the individual identities of all of our performers. And this is something that we've been kind of exploring over the course of our rehearsal process, especially in the past year, to make sure, you know, that we are presenting ourselves by the end of the story as separate and non-white. But the other thing that sort of guided us towards this was an exploration both also of my origins in Chile and indigenous history in Chile. And I'm really, you know, sort of curious and excited to hear about Lucrecia and Iman's exploration of Quechua culture, because I ended up going to the Atacama and learning more about Quechua culture that was indigenous to the Atacama Desert. And something that I researched and discovered through that that research was the new Indian architecture that's happening in Bolivia since Morales was after his first presidency, and the way indigenous communities in Bolivia finally had the resource to really present their culture and their art through architecture. And this new architecture is really fascinating to me because it's a mix of indigenous Quechua art and its relationship with contemporary exchange and commerce with China, actually. And that kind of Asian Latino-ness of Bolivian architecture sort of like clicked with me as a Korean from Chile. And these have been sort of like pointers that have been influencing not just our design process, but also like process of self-exploration in the making of this work.
Wow, thank you so much. I know that we had an initial question from Tracy Lang about the mapping of the virtual backgrounds, you know, for Nero. There's so much to talk about for each and every one of these works. I think that you begin to give us a sense of the sort of teamwork that needs to happen for that to be realized.
I can quickly answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, just really quickly, what we did was we shot everything with green screens, and then our video designer basically keyed all the footage and eliminated the green screens and made all the footage transparent so that we were only seeing the performers and not the green screens that we're performing in front of. And then with After Effects, we were able to create the backgrounds, the animations, and all the different things you see in our work. And even the Zoom grid, you know, in our music video was created in post digitally. That's not the real Zoom grid. We made one. Yeah, so that's how we did that.
Thank you so much. I want to lift another question that we got from Luvan Robertson. Are any of the presenters' companies interested in producing and directing works by others? I'm now seeing how my core narrative stage performance piece could be presented via Zoom or some other immersive technology.
Yes, definitely. Yes. I mean, Gabriel, yeah, North Star Projects is well, that's how we collaborate, right, with other artists and organizations. And yes, absolutely. As directing, as producing, I'm always looking for projects to get involved in. I'm interested in audio projects and everything that we've been talking about, technology, multidisciplinary, all that stuff is exciting to me. So that's kind of how I choose the projects that I want to work on. And Gabriel, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, here I am. I don't have an issue with, like, I'm a director. I'm also open for any type of conversations. I've been thinking a lot about becoming a producer as well in other projects. So for anything I'm here, I'm very interested about how to take stories and turn them into opportunities for community and opportunities for other ways of intersecting with real economic and cultural impact inside of the people and the stories that are being represented. So anything as well, community engagement, I'm here for it.
For Anonymous Ensemble, I mean, both Lucrecia and I work as freelancers out in the world extensively, as do all of our company members. But as far as the company itself, we're an ensemble and we have a devising process of our own. And we will work with other people, but it has to come out of our process. So for instance, for Yontop, we were almost a year into the development of Yontop when we realized that we needed it to be, present a Quechua perspective and a Quechua voice and Quechua language. And so then we actively sought the playwright, the writer, the poet, who could provide that for the piece. So we are now producing the work of somebody else, but it was arrived at through our process and getting there. If that makes sense.
But I think I should encourage anybody that is watching and is excited about opportunities, that there's a small grants, small companies, small places in which you just need to reach out and figure it out. A way in, and a small, create samples of your work, create curious. And I always think that if you like somebody's work, go on and knock at the doors and say, hey, I'm interested. And good collaborations or good relationships come from, all of those type of small, conversations that start from just a say, hi, I love your work. And then, curiosity is both ways. I don't think we could only learn from ourselves. We always learning from working with others. So we encourage everybody, even if you feel like you're small, like it's a little bit, just reach out.
Yeah, I want to echo what Lucrecia said. We are an ensemble too, and a lot of our collaborations are like many years long. But a lot of new artists are referred to us through our community partners, and we begin working with them in different events and activities. And as opportunities arise to collaborate artistically in the work we're developing, this is how we sort of bring in new members into our ensemble and ensure that, voices from our community are continuously included as part of our ensemble and repertory work. We produce a show every 3-4 years, so we don't have the capacity to fully produce another artist's work, but we'd like to get there with more resources. But yes, please do reach out if you're interested in working with us. Actually, not a lot of people do, so you'd be very welcome.
Thank you for that. I want to spend a few minutes saying that in assembling this panel together, besides reaching to the most talented people around me, I also was looking at it a little bit from an agnostic, MTech agnostic perspective, right? So this is still an emergent field. There is a wonderful set of definitions, sort of glossary. There are other resources being produced as part of this series for you to become more deeply familiar with all the elements of what is now considered immersive technology. And I was really interested in hearing from folks who I considered early adopters, who were doing the testing before we had the name for it, and who were really working in some instances outside of this strictly, sort of the narrower path of the technology that we're looking to further explore. I also think it's important to note that society-wide, we are at that acceleration point for immersive technology and immersive experiences. And the first sector that does the deep dive is always the one that's best capitalized. So you're going to be inundated by commercial opportunities and commercial offers. So what better time for a community and for, you know, mission-driven artists to also get a hold of this technology and find ways to make it purposeful. We've had some really tremendous examples of what that is. So in looking at that glossary, I say, you know, bring your imagination, bring your risk-taking, you know, bring that part of you that allows you to be hands-on. That's one of the lessons that we're learning here. I wonder if all of you can take a moment to think about intersectionality, because it is something that you have voiced in different ways in each of your contributions. I think, you know, we need to think about the social change that we've been experiencing for the last few years, the racial reckoning that happened with George Floyd, the experience of pandemic itself, and a collective awareness of decades-long work of justice that has been happening, but has always been sort of in the shadow of other promises that are now broken. So, you know, in the spirit of your own work, if you could give us a little bit of your thoughts on this.
I have some thoughts on this. These are personal beliefs. I'm not to sound like a crazy person, but these are personal beliefs. I have a master's in media studies, and I started to study media studies because I was really obsessed with symbols and just the idea that we as humans are always perpetuating and creating extensions of ourselves. So everything that we create is just an extension of our mind and our body. But I think as I really started to understand semiology and understand marketing and all of these parts, I developed a fascination with the idea of intersectionality, because I don't think that intersectionality actually exists. I feel that at the beginning we had something, and even if you look back, let's say at theater, you had something that just took on many different disciplines and things and put it all together as an experimentation. But then suddenly humans, we have the necessity of truly understanding each of these things because they're creations of us, but we don't really understand them. And I feel that we are getting to a point in humanity where we're taking all of these disciplines, understandings of different things, and then putting them back together, because at the end, they come back together. For me, that's the planet. Like, the planet doesn't think itself as intersections of water and land and animals, but it's just everything coming together as an ecosystem. And that's what I find really fascinating about technology, digital technology and world building, because for me is humanity's inquiry on creating more humans. I know it sounds really weird and odd, but it's the idea that we're actually finding a functionable way of creating worlds. Very excited about that. Very excited about the possibilities of us envisioning spaces and worlds that are more functionable than the systems that we have at the moment. Because as we know at this point, most of them are really broken. So that on the one side, and then on the other side, that popped up as you were talking, Arnaldo, is about the fact that I do think that technology can be a very spiritual thing. If you think about it, that sometimes when I talk to theater people about this, people are very scared sometimes about the digitalization of things. But when you're talking to somebody over the phone, you're talking to a spirit in a certain type of way. You're engaging in a conversation with something ethereal, something that doesn't really physically exist, but that you have a connection and a bond with. So the possibilities of not seeing technology as something for capitalization of our markets, which we know that are broken, but seeing it as an opportunity for transcending the parameters that are given to us, it's very engaging to me.
Amazing, thank you. Kyoung, did I see your gears turning?
Yes, but Gabriel was so profound and deep and spiritual about his relationship with technology. I feel like my comment will pale in comparison. But I do think, what's been sort of interesting as we started sharing our work online and through these virtual platforms that became accessible to us, I thought a lot about the sort of digital revolution that happened with music, the moment independent musicians could connect with other audiences through their own platforms and mechanisms without the need of the industry. And at a time when the theaters all shut down and so many of us were out of work, our ability to create work through Zoom and still connect with our audiences with the absence of theaters actually sort of provided to us an opportunity to really think about what our relationship is to our community and our audiences, even if the theaters never came back. And actually, it's a very empowering opportunity for us to be able to make this work and to think that we can make it without a theater. Because we're constantly seeking permission and an invitation for us to be able to present our work, and that's really no longer needed. So I feel very free, but I feel like it's a moment of disruption and deep change. And I think where this work fits within the existing systems is going to be a conversation that we're going to have to continuously talk about. And at the same time, I think that for the communities we intend to serve with our work, they knew how to find us because we were going to be in the theater at some time. And now that we are not doing our performances in that way, I feel like the challenge is for our community and for our intended audiences who we want to serve, especially at a more local level, now that we're not really touring, creating a theater in public spaces, bringing this digital technology and making it accessible in public spaces and becoming more like a public art project, or is sort of new ways of us actually sharing our work, and it's a big learning curve for us, but I think also an opportunity for like deep collaborations with artists that are working in that specific form. Yeah,
I'd love to pick up where Kyoung left off and also address Luvan's comment. One of our upcoming pieces, well, we've always considered technology as not an aesthetic. Like technology, oftentimes I think in theater, at least 20 years ago, it was there was the aesthetic of techno theater, and we've always thought of technology as a tool. It's like it's a means of creating a meaningful interaction between performers, whatever that is, and audience, whatever that is. Some sort of real-time exchange, and it's a back and forth exchange. And so and one of our new project that because we're always like developing one and then sort of like writing the grants for the next project, which is a couple of years down the road, but we are going to address Luvan's comment. I'm now seeing how these new emergent technologies are excellent for telling Earth stories, which is actually what we want to do. It's this piece called Body of Land. And we just did our first workshop, and we're interested in letting plants talk and doing site-specific work using technology, using like crazy audio routing and millions of channels of digital audio, of course, but letting the plants tell the story and working with an indigenous storyteller, a North American First Nations storyteller, and her daughter, who's a restorative agriculture specialist, and we're working with this climate farm here in Virginia where I live, with these people who are working with land and working with plants, because we have to start listening to plants and the earth and the stories that they can tell. And we think that technology is a really good means of telling those stories. So that is that. So Luvan, that is where we are headed.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I can't help but think of the ways in which, we talk about extension biotechnology, right? So what's the relationship for us as individuals, for us as communities, bodies of people that are collective? And of course, the urgent race to do something about the planet. So really, really key work. I want to say that one of the intended aftermaths of this beautiful conversation is something like a list of essential and desired support that performance spaces can provide to to companies like yours. And in my mind, that is both for the creation of hybrid live digital experiences that have immersive components that are immediately experienced by the folks who visit the space, as much as creating the right space for folks to go into a virtual world, right? So when we featured Gabriela and Adriana's sort of workshopped piece at Solfest, we really had a limited number of headsets and a small room to have it. So also trying to think of ways in which that could be amped. What would that be like? So I'm going to invite you to, there's probably some things that you already thought of that will be immediately useful, but it would be fantastic to hear you think through some others that may be at the top of the list.
I just wanted to make a comment also. What I find really inspiring about the conversation we're having today, and what I'm gathering from all these companies that we're sharing space right now, is that we are creating all this work outside institutions. I think we are sort of creating all of this stuff outside the mold, and I think that that's important to sort of explain to our virtual audience, that we are not seeing your faces, but we are sort of also giving the opportunity to understand that this is incredibly liberating, because you are not stepping into anybody's idea of what you need to create, and that's incredibly healthy. I think it's very healthy, it's very good, and we go with support from institutions that understand that this is looking forward, and this is absolutely something that is moving into a different way of understanding the world. I'm a mother, so I have a kid that understands the world completely different than I do, and understands technology very different. So I am sort of excited about where that is leading me to understand, to learn, and I just wanted to make this comment, just because institutions as they are sort of given this idea that we need to fit in when we're actually not, and we're creating a different path. So I'm sorry, I needed to sort of deviate the conversation, put it that in there, but I just want everybody to feel empowered that embracing technologies, embracing forwardness is just going to make you a more interesting artist. So yes, generational comfort. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's, yes.
I have an anecdote. I was in South by Southwest this year, and I went to see a panel that was being led by somebody from Facebook, from Meta. And it was 4 different people that had creating companies utilizing metaverse, or creating a metaverse. And we had 2 panelists. One of them had been creating an app that allows people to go inside of fantastical worlds to deal with post-traumatic disorders, to deal with heavy depressions or anxieties. And we had somebody who was creating a golf game. And the last question was, what would you hope that the environment or what would you give into the environment to make it more realistic, or what would you expect out of the environment to become something more realistic? And the person who built the golf game said, I just hope that it becomes so realistic that people decide to play golf inside of my app as opposed to go outside and play golf. And everybody in the audience just went, ah. And then this person said, the person from the mindfulness app said, I don't think that's, first she was like, I don't think that's healthy for anybody. But then she talked about the limitations, the limitations that we need to create for technology, so that it's not taken by corporations that want to do this on a policy level. And then she talked about the fact that even if they took it, we still have the power of creating. because at the end, what we've been given with this is the ability of creating worlds, and that cannot be taken. So they can commercialize out of it, but we can still be creating worlds. And I think what Lucrecia was saying really resonates with me with that, because it is liberating. It's the fact that we don't have to be dependent on a physical location anymore, of an institution of a box to be able to create work. That we can, with our own hands in a community, make things happen. And I also wanted to talk with that, talking about access and technology, because I do think that community really plays a big part in this. I find it really fascinating that you can go in a Discord channel and people are willing to help you find a job, find somebody that will give you money, find a sponsor, commercial or not, find so many different ways of just coming together with you and do it. And I think that happens because there's a lot of money that came out of the pandemic that is being given to develop these things. And also NFTs. I do think that NFTs play, I'm that guy that we're getting talking about NFTs, but NFTs do play a big role in all of these and democratizing currency, because it's not the dollar anymore. It's democratizing currency for everybody in different ways. And that's amazing.
Thank you, Gabriel. I think I'd like to piggyback on his comments about the relationship between the work we're doing and commerce. I know experimentation and this kind of risk we're taking are really hard to fund, but our organization has been really lucky to be able to receive funding for the work that we're doing and to develop these concepts. And many times, I think some of our funders were confused. They were like, isn't this a visual art project? Isn't this a film project? Are you sure you need theater funding? And there were a lot of different boxes we weren't fitting in, but we were still able to find enough resources to show others that we could do this work. And I think in the end, when we were ready to produce it fully, I think as artists, we still missed being in the theater, and we're so thankful, you know, to be in residency at Pregones. We've converted your theater into a green screen studio basically for 2 weeks, and we've all mastered the art of solo green screen performance for the past 2 years. And I think that's sort of what we've achieved and learned as artists during this time. But when we're sharing our work with community, I have to be honest, some of our community partners say, you know, this work is too triggering. We're still too, you know, nervous about being out. Are you sure you're reaching the people you want to be reaching this way? And you know, when it comes for our audiences and our community to have a space, I still think that that space the theater provided is irreplaceable, and to find a new space for it, or a space where, you know, people can come and be with others, still really matters. And we've been able to kind of bubble ourselves up to create this work, but finding that other next step of engaging our audience with the work is always the challenge. And that is the sum total of theater. You can't just make the work without your community and without your audience. It is the relationship between the work and your community that really is theater. So, so that's going to be our next exploration after our residency. Yeah.
I want to add, yes, I want to add a couple of things and answer Arnaldo's question. So yes, what Lucrecia said, absolutely. That's what's been so exciting about doing this work. And I think institutions and organizations during the pandemic were like, oh, we need to create stuff. Oh, we should have invested more in individual artists, which is why I was really happy to see a lot of grants starting to be provided to individual artists. Soulfest would not be possible without Pregones PRTT and us having that space there. Yes, we can do so much thing virtually, but there is nothing, right, like being together in a space and a gathering. Even though we haven't been able to go fully to social events, we did have a social event in Central Park outdoors and everything, but that is something that community, that creating of that community, that breaking bread together is so important. No, that it's always how organizations and institutions can help us providing that space, right, for rehearsals, for development, for green screen studio. During the pandemic, we had to ship kits to actors, and actors had to set up their light boxes and their it was like 4 types of lamps plus the screen plus the microphone plus the external camera. I became a little bit of like an actor whisperer, walking actors through because they had to do that, and it was a lot of work. So it's an appreciation also for the crew that work behind the camera usually, and editors, as Kyoung has said. Super excited about seeing Kyoung's project because, for example, a project like Kyoung that you have, a producer, a theater producer would look at it and say, maybe the cast is too big, maybe this is too long, it's not possible. And all of a sudden, now it is possible. These stories are now possible because we are not restricted by certain things that maybe traditionally would have been restricted. So yes, Hernando, like an opportunity to, there's so much talent here and so much talent even in the people who are watching, who are saying like, I have an idea, I have a project. So being able to have little micro grants, the space in order to get together and to develop the work, studio space for the green screen, equipment, all of that mentorship. Arnaldo, you, Rosalba, Jorge, I view as mentors, and that's how I have grown and learned the last couple of years. So that is something that I truly value as well, and I think is really important to be able to provide for everyone who's trying to create the work.
Thank you so much. I have to say that's reciprocal. I have learned a ton from everybody in this room, and I am grateful for it. And we are, a better organization for it. I'm really struck by the sort of through line of ethics in the way that you are like sort of all of you are thinking of the technology and its potential, and not letting, even though it's more part of this is an immense seduction of the technology and its potential, how you're not sort of jumping in that. And the example, from that Gabriel gave us also made me think of something. Some long time ago, there was a game called The Sims. I think it was one of the first CDR games that had a virtual environment you could create. And it really stirred the question of, how ethical is it to make a sim go hungry, for example. That was a big deal. I think that so that whole field of gaming accelerated exponentially. And sort of late in the game, no pun intended, I was in dialogue with folks at the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures, and we were talking like, can we do, a culture and arts centric, social focus game? Can we find gamers to do something? And at that point, it was so hard to recruit gamers that weren't in the commercial environment. That in a sense, it was like we lost that race. So I don't know if you care to comment about that possibility. I really love the way in which you are making this technology your own and sort of choosing to carve your own openings for it. I'm sort of interested, and I think that I share this with my colleagues at Enfoco and at the Bronx Council on the Arts and BronxNet, the desire to sort of recruit folks to embrace immersive technology now. Segue from what Adriana said, the Enfoco is looking at the possibility of coming up with some micro grants that are specific for experimentation and risk-taking. BronxNet is opening a studio, in its sort of a public access model that will allow interested folks to interact and with the equipment and to put some of the basics to practice. And we're committed to that, but we really, I think, need to be guided by the kinds of ethical thinking that you as creatives are providing us. So I welcome any additional comments you may want to bring. We're about 12 minutes out, and I can't stop hearing you.
Couple of resources. There's something called, I learned about this, I think like 7 months ago, but there's something called serious gaming, which is people that are utilizing gaming as an opportunity to do serious things. If you search it up, you're gonna find it. It's over here is also a link to join the community of Unity for Impact. Everybody's accepted. It's just a small form that you fill out, and here that's a Discord channel of everybody who has been involved with Unity 3D, which is the largest company on 3D development and building that is doing something for impact. There's people doing things with health, there's people doing things with games, there's people doing things for ecology, for economics, and many other things.
I have a quick comment, and it's not about gaming, but it was about the latter half of your comments on just how, you know, in the invitation to get involved in the usage of these new technologies. I think, you know, we're mostly working with filmic and cinematic kind of like tools and storytelling. So, but from our experience now collaborating with director photographies and editors and sound recorders for the first time, something that I want to say is, you know, especially for people of color who are trying to break into the film industry, we have very limited opportunities and resources to really make this work. And when you invite people that have an artistic vision or a voice, but cannot find a way to express themselves in that industry, when you open yourselves up and invite them to work with you, they are, like, as Gabriel said, like so open and so willing to collaborate and to share and to really experiment. And I think, you know, these gaps that existed between the film people and theater people that I experienced really are sort of like not there anymore. And it's a really great opportunity to build bridges with new collaborators in different mediums that are also skilled in these technologies, because like it feels so good. I mean, like, I think the film industry is also very cruel and capitalistic and sort of like pegs people into very specific jobs. So when you invite them to a theatrical process, they're like, oh my God, this is going to be so much fun. So there's a lot of joy in working with folks who really understand the gear as well.
I did want to add also about the activism or just how each specific artist or company picks their projects and what they're passionate about. Normally, I believe in an institution or an organization, they don't have that freedom, right, to choose any project because they have other things that they have to worry about, whether it's selling tickets or et cetera, et cetera. So I really love your question about intersectionality and interdisciplinary, because I had to look those terms up when I first did my first project, when we brought Soulfest to online. And what I've loved about it is that during the pandemic, there was a lot of isolation. We experienced a lot of isolation. There were also intergenerational technology literacy. There was a huge gap in that, even just applying for the vaccine and everything. So there was a lot of help that we needed to give each other during that time. And also, it also affected many groups. For me personally, reproductive justice and fertility issues is something that I'm passionate about. So I loved how all these things we are able to work with each other because it's easy to work virtually with each other and to create projects collaboratively where you are advocating for a specific thing that you may feel passionate about. I feel like it has created an easier access into that road that maybe as artists we may have not been advocates before, but I think a lot of us have become in the last couple of years. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that.
Thank you. Any final thoughts from Eamon and Lucrecia?
Let me think, final thoughts. I think that I'm looking at your comment, Arnaldo, about the digital gap remains and is racialized. The commercial sector will do more to bridge the gap as this market for tech solidified. I think that is something that as artists we can address, you know, and it's something that we're thinking about a lot right now, in particular, especially when we're working with these communities, these Quechua Andean communities, and how can we make it as accessible as possible? And and that's why we're doing it on Zoom, and which pretty much anyone can download on their phones. And we had Irma tells us this remarkable story about how there was somebody in a pueblo in the Andes, and he was watching one of our workshop performances of Yantop, and his mother just happened to come set down food for him while he was watching and started listening a little bit. And she was, indigenous Quechua, and she said, Lucrezia, do you remember exactly what she said to him? It was something like, finally. She was like, finally, I'm hearing our voice. And it was like, it was clear that it was in this New York venue, and it was an international audience. And I just love that story of how technology can be used in very concrete ways, and in the far reaches of the world, to do anti-racist work and validate cultures or something.
And validate our theatrical culture too. I think that there's a lot of things we need to improve. I'm taking away words about our ecosystem in the theater. There's a lot of broken promises and a lot of things that need to be better. And for somebody, because of my design work, I came in and out of so many rooms, and I'm just try to be hopeful. And I love the fact that I could be in a room with people that understand that it's necessary to do this. No, I don't think not everybody is as elevated to understand all the changes that you must do in yourself and in the rest. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm just very happy to be sharing this space with everybody at this moment.
Likewise, you are the early adopters, you are the example, and we are so grateful for your creativity and for your leadership to open up these spaces and these forms of community building. Super grateful for that. We're going to wrap up. I appreciate that you have seeded this conversation with so many important and significant threads. It makes it an open conversation. I invite everybody to please make sure that you check in the series webpage in the Enfoco website. I've just added it to the link to the chat. Stay in touch with the artists. Their contact and their bios are also on the page. And we very much look forward to everything that's coming out from you, and to stay in touch. So I pass it on to Oscar for any last words, and much gratitude to all of you.
Hi, everyone. I just want to take a moment to thank you all for joining us, and to remind you to visit enfoco.org. There are 2 sessions left as part of the series, and we will be releasing information really soon about those 2. If you have any questions, you can reach us at info@enfoco.org or oscar@enfoco.org. And I hope that everyone has a beautiful rest of their evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you all.
So nice to meet you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Likewise. Have a good one, everyone.